There are a lot of people upset about certain things regarding Dragons Dogma, and there are a lot of people upset at other people for being upset. This is the internet. You know how this goes. I don't need to explain this. I was lucky enough to read through a lot of YouTube comments. I do read every single comment on my videos, and that really gave me some insight into things that people either don't really understand, are misinformed about, and just a lot of people not understanding each other or why other people are upset. So here I am. Hi, I'm Mug Thief, YouTube's friendliest human dachshund. Seriously, pick any one of them. To explain everything that people are upset about Dragons Dogma with, why they're upset, and give some context to some of the conversations around it as the hype and the anticipation and all of these things are reaching their peak here close to launch. And I want to start talking about Vocations, the fact that there are 10 Vocations in the game, and why people are disappointed at this, because there were a ton of comments of people saying, why are you disappointed or upset about 10 Vocations? But a lot of those comments basically came to say, 10 is a lot, I bet they're very deep and have a lot of cool stuff to them. Why would you complain about it? There were plenty of people echoing the fact that it is disappointing to them, or they were expecting more Vocations, but an overwhelming majority were people saying that they don't get it. What's the problem? Gamers sure are entitled these days. Okay, I guess. But some of the most bizarre comments are things like, if you played the first Dragons Dogma, you knew what to expect here. And the reason this one blows my mind is because I would assume that the people confused at why there are people in the community that feel like the Vocations that are available aren't satisfying to them, or they expected more, are precisely the people who played the first game and have certain expectations for the second one based on that first game, which I think are reasonable expectations to have. So I put together a little graph to really explain this. And I know that the first thing you're thinking when you see this graph is, wow, Mug, you should get a job in graphic design. I'm sorry. So these are the Vocations from Dragons Dogma 1. As you can see, you have base Vocations, and within those base Vocations, the one you can choose from the start of the game, you have Fighter, Strider, and Mage. It's very important to remember that Vocations in Dragons Dogma 1 could choose from different weapons as well. Particularly, the Strider and the Ranger both have access to daggers as well as bows. From there, all three of the Vocations go to their advanced Vocations, and they also have hybrid Vocations. So not only do you have Warrior, Sorcerer, and the Ranger, but you have the Assassin, the Magic Archer, and the Mystic Knight, each of them fitting neatly to complete this little ring of Vocations. If we move over to Dragons Dogma 2, we can see that they split the bows and the daggers between Thief and Archer, and now every Vocation can only use a single weapon type. As a side note, that's not necessarily a bad change. If they've deepened and improved the moveset by having it only be one weapon, that could actually be a benefit, but it still changes the playstyles from what was there before. But as we see in the graph though, of these 4 Vocations, only 2 of them have advanced Vocations, the Fighter and the Mage, which go into Warrior and Sorcerer. Then you also have the Mystic Spearhand, which is the hybrid of Fighter and Mage. And then you have the Magic Archer, the hybrid of Mage and Archer. But there's something missing towards the right and the bottom side of this graph compared to the Dragons Dogma 1 graph, which is there is no advanced Vocation for the Thief. There is no advanced Vocation for the Archer. There's not even the Assassin Vocation in some configuration between one of those two and the Fighter. We would have assumed that it would be Thief Fighter. There is no hybrid Vocation for the Thief with anything, and instead what we do have up here in the corner is the hybrid Vocation of the Trickster, which is a hybrid of... yes. And then in the other corner, the Warfarer. I do not understand for the life of me how somebody that comes from the Dragons Dogma 1 system to the Dragons Dogma 2 system could have expected this. This is a confusing mess that feels very haphazard, anything but organized. It's just like we put Vocations in places for reasons, and that's it. Thank you for playing. Will this affect the game negatively? Probably not. It'll probably be fine. We'll find many things to love in each of these, but it's very logical to have different expectations and to think that it will function similarly to how it did in Dragons Dogma 1. So as the Vocations were being revealed and we weren't sure what else there was a lot of anticipation towards what is the advanced version of the Thief, what is the advanced version of the Archer. Another side of this is that people rightly point out that the base classes are viable all the way until the end of the game. You never have to change your vocation if you don't want to. But you can't tell me that developers don't want you to move into the advanced vocations and to move into the hybrid vocations, be they more specialized, have a little bit more of a skill cap to them, or for whatever reason, because if they were all equal and there was no sense of progression by changing your vocation, they would all be available from the start. This is backed up by the fact that in Dragons Dogma 1, while they wanted to make the base classes still viable, they did not want them to be the strongest. And for those of you who are unaware, the Strider, which is the base class before the Ranger, is pretty much considered the best class in that game. Class and vocation I'm using interchangeably, you know what I mean. But that doesn't mean it's the same philosophy in this game. Maybe every single thing is balanced differently, but you can't tell me that this is intuitive and easy to understand for somebody coming in from the first game. But here's the other kicker regarding vocations. When I mentioned that some people are obviously disappointed, they wanted a more specialized or a different variant on Thief to look forward to later on in their playthrough, or the same thing with Archer, or potential hybrids, and people were excited to see, whoa, we knew what a magic archer was, but what's going to be a hybrid between thief and mage? Or how potentially the new combination of thief and archer would have given a completely different playstyle, maybe different movesets that returned the Strider. And then people said, that's what the Warfarer is for. And no, that is not what the Warfarer is for. Obviously the game isn't out. Numbers, tuning, balance could be out of whack once it's out. But the Warfarer, from what they've said, it's not designed for you to take daggers and a bow and make your own Strider. Because they've said that the intention of the Warfarer is to be considerably underpowered unless you take full advantage of the various weapons that you can use in the situations that you can take advantage of them. If you tried to do something that is specialized, or in this case just a mixture of two base classes, you'll probably be very underpowered and you won't have any unique or special skills of an updated Strider like people would expect. You will have access to the same skills that you have, but with the weapon swapping. Still limited to 3 total skills, and without a specific vocation skill for a unique vocation. Beyond that comes the complications of actually becoming a Warfarer, which we don't have the details for. But it seems pretty obvious with how the progression is made, how the little borders work, that it'll probably be by having every other vocation unlocked. Not only that, but access to different abilities of the Warfarer are gated by the abilities that you have in each of the different vocations. So many people were looking forward to playing maybe Thief, and then playing Archer, and then playing Strider, or whatever that hybrid was, or moving on to the Advanced Thief. And not only does that not exist, but if you wanted to play Build Your Own Strider, you'd still have to go and play everything else, or at least unlock it, in order to build a poor man's Strider. It is completely understandable, in my opinion, that people had certain expectations to what the vocations would be. It makes a ton of sense that people have been theorizing about how the vocations would work and what would be the potential new vocations all the way since 6-7 months ago. And it's completely normal for them to see an interview that says, these are the 10 vocations in the game, and to kind of be sad. Nobody really threw a fit. Nobody was mad about it. On Twitter and Reddit and other places like that, which are normally the worst places you could go, everybody was pretty understanding and optimistic. But then I come here on YouTube and all I see are people screaming stuff, and I just don't get it. So I hope that this is an explanation that helps contextualize where those expectations were coming from and where that potential disappointment can come from as well. So let's move on to the big one. The 30 FPS uncapped frame rate. Firstly, I think it's really interesting that in the same comment sections you can see people calling other players entitled for having expectations in a sequel, while there are tons of people commenting about the uncapped 30 FPS frame rate and how the game is garbage. I've seen so many comments that are just Dragons Dogma 2, more like Dragons Poo-Poo Garbage 2, 30 FPS uncapped frame rate, trash game, bad company. And just to be clear here, the amount of people that are actually trying to doom post about the game because of the performance, while having the knowledge of what FPS are, while having the knowledge of even what uncapped frame rates are and what are their pros and cons, probably while having knowledge of variable refresh rates, still seem very new to the internet, because a ton of different games try and pull this off and they don't. And what you do is that you call it out, you don't buy it, and you wait for the inevitable performance patch, or the game will just suffer the consequences in its little corner. I think a 30 FPS uncapped frame rate is terrible. I said it way back, and actually people told me that I was wrong, that uncapped frame rates are better. But as more videos, more comments, more Twitter posts, more threads came out saying this is the problem with uncapped frame rates, that people have changed their mind, which is the correct thing to do. Uncapped frame rates lead to very stuttery gameplay. And no, variable refresh rates aren't the solution to everything. I highly recommend you go check Digital Foundry and they will explain it for you perfectly. I'll have a video on it in the description below, beneath the like button. Now, I think it would have been much better to have the game capped at 30 FPS and try and lock it in, stable at 30. They didn't decide on this. They also have no mention of a performance mode, which I think is also pretty much unacceptable. But there is context necessary here as well. While it is unacceptable, and there can be myriad reasons why there is no performance mode or why they chose this, and we as consumers can tell them, hey, you're wrong, please give us what we want or we won't give you our money. Not every game needs every option. I do think that every game needs at least the option of giving people 30 frames per second graphics quality mode and a 60 frames per second performance mode, just to have the option, although we've seen them delivered very poorly. I played through Final Fantasy VII Remake in graphics mode, even though I thought the performance in graphics mode was terrible, because the performance mode looked so horrible that I just preferred it. And normally I wouldn't do that. I am a PC gamer, I've played a lot of highly competitive games. I game in 5140 by 1440 at 240 frames per second. If there's anyone that's going to be elitist about this and tell you, oh, you can definitely tell the difference between a 144 Hz monitor and a 240 Hz monitor, it's me. But the truth is that Final Fantasy VII Remake doesn't demand any sort of precision in order to be played and enjoyed. I would enjoy it more in a performance mode that didn't sacrifice everything visual and cover it in Vaseline, but there are compromises and different games that can function in different categories. I don't think Dragons Dogma 2 is the case. It seems like a game that will be highly dependent on reaction times and input timings and would benefit greatly from a graphically lesser but 60 frames per second locked performance mode. And if that's a deal breaker for you, make yourself heard. Say it out there. Maybe don't just say the game is bad though, because we don't know if the game is bad. Maybe the game is excellent and suffers terribly technically. Maybe on console it's a horrible experience, and on PC, on a high-end PC that can throw however much power you want at it, it's the greatest game of the year. But what it is a very unfortunate set of circumstances to release a game in today. Now, like I said, I play on PC, so I normally don't care about these things, but one of the core things about my channel is that consumer advocacy and making sure that we get the best games possible and the best practices possible is important to me. And calling out stupid stuff is important. And I do not think that 30 frames per second uncapped is good in any capacity in 2024. And voting with your wallet is important. Telling them that you're not buying it because of this is important for developers to get on the same page and understand what are the standards that we demand for products. If you want us to buy this, you have to deliver this much. And if you don't, we won't buy it. I will still buy the game. I will still make videos on the game because I play on PC, and hopefully the optimization is there. I will report on that optimization once the game is out. And if one day I have money to spare, I'll invest it in being able to report on the state of the console versions of games or a second PC just to test out performance on lower end hardware. That is not today though. So pay attention to reviews. Let's hope that Capcom realizes how many people are against this and they do decide to implement a different mode in the game, or at least announce that it's coming in a day one patch or a week one patch, and that they will be addressing the issue. And to end it all off, the adaptive difficulty. And this one to me was pretty cut and dry, but it seems that a lot of people don't really understand what adaptive difficulty is. And a lot of the comments I've read are people just saying, no, this is what adaptive difficulty is. I mean, no, just because you say it is does not mean that it is. You are not making the game. It doesn't have to be what I say it is, but I am at least basing what I believe it to be on all of the previous titles that implement it from the same company making Dragons Dogma 2. So in the war of speculation, I'd say it's safer for you to take that assumption than to think, no, it's just inflating numbers. I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's explain it piece by piece. Adaptive difficulty is a very broad term because what it does is change the difficulty of the game on the fly. But what is the difficulty of a game? Difficulty can be modified in tiny little things. Even though what we might directly point at, because it's the clearest indication of something, is, well, now I do less damage, or the enemies have more armor or more HP, that is not normally what adaptive difficulty does, because there's 1,000 other ways to keep the system invisible with the objective of making sure that a person doesn't feel frustrated or feel like a game is unnecessarily tedious, not to artificially frustrate you or to artificially baby you. This has been implemented in tons of different games in tons of different ways, where they manipulate the backend given certain circumstances to make sure that the player doesn't just hate the game in what they feel is an unfair situation. Be that with probability chances in SRPGs, unless it's XCOM, 99% never hit a shot. In Resident Evil 4, the game dropping more ammo or more medicine depending on what you're lacking. Or in the case of that game, which is a prime example of Capcom doing adaptive difficulty even now because it's still in the remake, they will actually increase the aggressiveness and the total HP of enemies if you are doing very well and are overly stocked up. And people respond with, oh, so they're making the game harder on me because I'm good at the game. I don't want that. I want to feel overpowered and rewarded for my hoarding and all of the different ammo and grenades and stuff that I'm carrying. You will still feel that, but they want you to still feel tension. They want you to still feel like this is a survival horror game and you are being pressured by the enemy and you have to spend your resources in order to get there. And that resource management, even if you break out of it, there is an escape velocity. Once you're out of it, you will always be fine. But they think, okay, well, the appropriate response to this to maintain tension is to up the difficulty in different ways to still have you be a little bit on edge. It works the other way around. If you find yourself in a boss fight with very limited ammo, they will lower the HP to guarantee that you can beat the game and you don't end up in a unwinnable situation, either by dropping more ammo during the boss fight or just by making sure that if you hit all the bullets you have at the moment, you will at least get through it. Because if you didn't, how fun would it be if the game just said, oh, well, I don't know, I hope you made a different save, or now you're going to restart the whole game because you just came into this room without the things necessary to do it. Well, some people might say that's how it used to work back in the day. I mean, cool for that, I guess. There's a lot of games that still do that, but I think that when adaptive difficulty is done right, all it does is provide convenience for the player, minimizing how many points of frustration you're going to have in either direction, and it's meant to be invisible. Will that work out in this case? We don't know. Maybe that adaptive difficulty is very apparent, very annoying, and ruins the experience for people. But just because it's in the game doesn't mean the game is worse. It also doesn't mean that it's better, but it does mean it has the potential to be better than it would be without adaptive difficulty. All you need to do is implement it correctly. But this is a Capcom game. If what you want is for the game to not baby people because you feel this sense of pride by beating a game that other people can't beat, that is not what they are trying to do here. They're trying to take a franchise that did pretty well for itself on its first outings and blow it up into a big product that a lot of different people can play and enjoy. As far as we know, the game has difficulty options, so people who are not that good at games can just put it on easy, and if even then they're not that good, hopefully the adaptive difficulty system will train them enough and push them along until they get their wings and can fly and beat the game. And if you want that journey to be more difficult, you just put it on hard, where probably, if we're looking at something like Resident Evil, most of that adaptive difficulty stuff will be turned off. Would this be better if there were an option to say no adaptive difficulty? Yes. Any option, in my opinion, is always better. Most people play games to just enjoy them, so giving them options to tailor that experience to how they wish to enjoy the game, I think is always better. Oh, but Elden Ring doesn't have difficulty settings. It has 17 million ways to make the game incredibly easy if you want to. Much more than any previous From Software game. If you really want to talk about preserving the difficulty of a game, let's talk about Sekiro for a while. But Elden Ring does implement those things. While it's not a menu toggle, it definitely offers players the option to play the game without as much requirement for skill. And I'm not saying that there's a direct correlation because I don't have the data for it. And probably a lot of the sales of Elden Ring are just pure hype and how cool it is. But I do think that it probably helped that it feels more accessible in many different ways compared to previous From Software games, just how much more it sold, how much bigger of a success it was compared to their previous games. Can't wait for the Elden Ring hate brigade to storm the comments now and say how it's the worst From Software game, because I've seen that a lot as well. But that is the situation. I hope I've given some context on things. I hope this helps to lower some of the tensions, because we should all be celebrating right now. Whether you haven't played Dragons Dogma, but you're just excited for this one, or you're a longtime fan, or getting a great game from a director that I love, that I think does some excellent work. We're all excited for it. Many of us thought that this day would never come, and we just want to enjoy a good video game. At the end of the day, everybody wants that same thing, and I don't see the need for criticizing other people for what they wanted or what they didn't want, just in general for negativity. So anyways, I've been Mugthief. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to hit the like button. It helps out a ton. And if you want more coverage of games, it would make me incredibly happy if you hit the subscribe button. And my promise to you as a subscriber is that if I upload something, it's because I think I have something worthwhile to say to you. So, the button's right there. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, I will see you again very soon.